Fellow countrymen and women, the developments surrounding the presidential election have reached a point that demands the immediate attention of every Zambian. The Electoral Commission of Zambia, the Church, civil society, domestic and international election observers, diplomatic missions, and the international community. What we're witnessing can no longer reasonably be dismissed as a collection of isolated incidents. Reports reaching us point to a disturbing and increasingly widespread pattern involving interference with electoral officers, threats against returning officers, missing and allegedly stolen Gen 20 forms, questionable alteration of electoral records, interference by security agencies, intimidation of accredited political agents, and a crackdown on opposition leaders and persons playing pivotal roles in this election. Gen 20 forms are fundamental to the aggregation, verification, declaration of results at presidential level. Any unlawful interference with their custody, movement, or contents therefore strikes directly at the credibility of the election and at the constitutional right of Zambians to determine who governs them. A climate of fear cannot produce a free and fair election. Of grave concern is the widespread crackdown on opposition leaders, officials, lawyers, political actors, and other persons playing pivotal roles in this electoral process. We have received reports that opposition figures and persons associated with the opposition have been taken into custody and in some instances allegedly held incommunicado, denied access to lawyers, and prevented from communicating with their families. We call to mind, among others, our lawyer, George Sanga, the UNIP President, Bishop Trevor Mwamba, Honorable Mtotwe Kafwaya, Chester, Rooney, Zubi, Richard Banda, Felix Piri, Patrick Mwansa, and many others. The authorities must immediately disclose their whereabouts and legal status of every detained person, the legal basis upon which they are being held, and any charges against them must be disclosed. Where they remain in custody, they must be given immediate access to their lawyers and families and accorded the full protection of due process. These are not peripheral actors. They include people playing important political, legal, and electoral roles during a critical moment in the democratic life of our country. You cannot have a free and fair election in the atmosphere of terror, intimidation, and manipulation. An election is not free merely because citizens were permitted to cast ballots. The process must remain free and fair through voting, counting, tallying, verification, dispute resolution, and final declaration. Of concern are Central Province, Copperbelt, and Lusaka. We continue to receive disturbing reports from Central Province, Copperbelt Province, Lusaka Province, involving high levels of interference with electoral officials, threats directed at officers entrusted with electoral materials, and verification of results. We further received reports of missing and allegedly stolen Gen 20 forms, attempts to obtain these documents outside established procedures, and pressure upon officials responsible for their custody. These allegations, considered alongside reports already received from Southern, Northwestern, and other provinces, require immediate national attention. Every Gen 20 form must be accounted for. Every movement of an original Gen 20 form must have a lawful and verifiable chain of custody. Every electoral officer must be protected from political, administrative, and security sector interference. Our earlier demand was that the original Gen 20 forms, polling station and constituency tally records, electronic transmission records, system logs, and records identifying persons who collected or transported electoral documents be immediately preserved. That demand is now even more urgent. Questionable conclusions of results in constituencies. Serious questions have arisen regarding the manner in which electoral processes have reportedly been concluded in a number of constituencies. Kalulushi, Bwanamkubwa, Chawama, Kabwata, and Kanyama are but a few constituencies where the circumstances surrounding the conclusions of the process require transparent scrutiny and reconciliation. These concerns should not be resolved through argument or administrative fiat. Let the documents speak. ECZ must make available the relevant polling station level results and permit reconciliation against the original Gen 20 forms and contemporaneous copies held by candidates, political parties, monitors, and accredited stakeholders. Our position has consistently been that disputed results can be objectively resolved through polling station by polling station reconciliation against original Gen 20 forms. The situation in Matero. The happenings in Matero provide an example of the wider irregularities being reported across the country. We have received allegations there ranging from alteration of results and interference by security agencies to threats and pressure directed at returning officers and other electoral officials. Matero cannot simply be treated as an isolated local dispute. When similar allegations are being received from different parts of the country, they must be investigated collectively to determine whether there is a broader pattern of interference with the electoral process. No returning officer should have to choose between personal safety and the faithful discharge of the constitutional and statutory duty. Southern Province turnout requires explanation. We are further concerned by reported turnout figures in Southern Province, particularly what appears to be a significant movement from figures of below 50% to approximately 70% turnout. Such a substantial change requires transparent explanation and reconciliation against the underlying polling station records. We do not ask Zambians to accept allegations merely because they are being made. Equally, the country should not be expected to accept unexplained figures simply because they have been announced. ECZ should publish the relevant polling station figures, registered voter numbers, votes cast, and corresponding Gen 20 forms so that the reported turnout can be independently reconciled against the records that existed at the polling station at the time of voting. If the figures are legitimate, transparency will confirm that. If there are discrepancies, transparency will expose them. ECZ must stop threatening accredited agents at Mulungushi. We are deeply concerned by reports that ECZ is threatening our duly accredited agents at the Mulungushi International Conference Center with withdrawal of their accreditation when they raise questions or challenge aspects of the verification and tallying process. This must stop. Our agents are not at Mulungushi as spectators, ceremonial observers, or passengers. They are participants in the electoral process. Their presence has meaning only if they are allowed to examine, question, challenge, and seek clarification regarding the figures and procedures being presented before them. An accredited agent must be permitted to question a result that appears inconsistent, raise procedural flaws, request supporting documentation, challenge figures against Gen 20 forms, and identify anything that may potentially discredit the integrity of the process. Accreditation cannot simultaneously be permission to participate and a weapon with which to silence participation. An agent who asks a legitimate question is not disrupting the process. An agent who asks for reconciliation of questionable figures is not obstructing ECZ. An agent who identifies a procedural irregularity is performing precisely the function which political agents are accredited for. We therefore demand that ECZ immediately assure all accredited agents at Mulungushi that no accreditation will be withdrawn merely because an agent raises a legitimate objection, questions figures, identifies procedural shortcomings, or insists upon reconciliation against the relevant Gen 20 forms. We further wish to give this remark to the extent that ECZ must give prior notice of constituencies to be announced after verification. Prudence and orderly administration further requires that reasonable prior notice be given as to which constituency results will next be presented for verification and consideration at Mulungushi. Political agents must have sufficient opportunity to organize and retrieve their corresponding Gen 20 forms and other records so that meaningful verification can occur when a particular constituency is called. There is little value in inviting agents into a national verification process if constituency results are presented without reasonable notice and agents are then expected to accept figures before they can retrieve and examine the corresponding records in their possession. Verification must be real, not ceremonial. Participation must be meaningful, not cosmetic. When an agent identifies a discrepancy between figures being presented by ECZ and the Gen 20 forms in that agent's possession, prudence requires that the process pause, the relevant documentation be examined, and the discrepancy reconciled before proceeding. Our original position was precisely that the answer to disputed figures is a transparent polling station by polling station reconciliation against Gen 20 forms and copies held by stakeholders. Do not threaten agents for asking questions. Answer the questions. Do not silence objections. Resolve them. Do not rush disputed results. Reconcile them. Do not demand blind acceptance. Produce the documentary record. ECZ must remember the solemn nature of the responsibility entrusted to it. The job of ECZ is not to preserve a sitting government. It is not the Commission's responsibility to protect an incumbent, opposition candidate, or political party or predetermined outcomes. It is not the Commission's responsibility to protect an incumbent, opposition candidate, political party, or determined outcome. Its responsibility is to protect the universal suffrage of the citizens of Zambia and ensure that their freely expressed electoral choice is accurately recorded, transparently verified, and faithfully declared. ECZ has a constitutional and democratic responsibility to command the confidence of all Zambians, not merely whichever candidate is ultimately declared the winner. The Commission must therefore create an environment at Mulungushi where accredited agents can participate freely, responsibly, and without intimidation. Transparency does not weaken an election, it legitimizes it. Scrutiny does not determine democracy, it protects it. We have previously raised concerns regarding reports alleging the involvement of intelligence and military personnel in the handling of movement of election materials. Security institutions exist to protect the Republic and its people. They must never become instruments for influencing an electoral outcome. Where security agencies are deployed at tallying centers or around returning officers, their role must remain strictly lawful, neutral, and limited to legitimate security functions. They must not unlawfully handle Gen 20 forms. They must not direct electoral officers. They must not interfere with tallying. They must not intimidate returning officers. And they must never be deployed to silence legitimate political participation or scrutiny. There is need that every Gen 20 form be accounted for. We repeat our demand that every original Gen 20 form be immediately secured and accounted for. ECZ must establish and disclose the chain of custody wherever Gen 20 forms have been collected, removed, or transferred. Where forms are missing or allegedly stolen, ECZ must disclose which polling stations and constituencies are affected, identity as to who last had lawful custody of them, establish the circumstances of their disappearance, and reconcile the affected results against contemporaneous stakeholder copies. Our position remains unequivocal. No original Gen 20 form should be destroyed, replaced, rewritten, or removed from its lawful chain of custody. Our immediate demands as follows. We call upon ECZ and the relevant authorities to immediately protect electoral and returning officers from intimidation, threats, and interference. Account for every original Gen 20 form, including all forms reported missing or removed or indeed stolen. Conduct a polling station by polling station reconciliation wherever presidential results are genuinely disputed. Transparently investigate the reported irregularities in Matero, Kalulushi, Bwanamkubwa, Chawama, Kabwata, Kanyama, and every other affected constituency. Transparently reconcile the reported turnout figures in Southern Province against the underlying polling station records. Disclose the role, if any, played by military, intelligence, police, or other security agencies in the custody, movement, or handling of electoral materials. Stop threatening accredited political agents at Mulungushi with withdrawal of accreditation merely for exercising their legitimate oversight role. Give reasonable prior notice of the constituency results to be considered next so that agents can prepare the corresponding Gen 20 forms and participate meaningfully in verification. Permit accredited agents to raise objections, question questionable results, identify procedural flaws, and demand reconciliation without intimidation. Immediately disclose the whereabouts and legal status of detained opposition figures and other persons connected with the electoral process, and guarantee them access to lawyers, their families, and due process of the law. We appeal to observers, the church, and the international community. We call upon domestic and international observers, the church, civil society organizations, the Law Association of Zambia, diplomatic missions, regional bodies, and all friends of Zambia's democracy to pay urgent attention to not merely to the final numbers being announced, but also to the environment in which those numbers are being produced, challenged, and verified. Our previous appeal asked these institutions to urgently engage ECZ regarding the custody and verification of presidential election materials. That appeal is much more urgent now. An election cannot be judged solely by what happens on polling day. It must be assessed by the totality of the process. A free election requires free citizens. A fair election requires independent electoral officers. A transparent election requires political agents who are free to scrutinize the process. A credible result requires electoral records whose integrity and chain of custody are beyond legitimate question. Power belongs to the people. This country does not belong to a government, political party, electoral institution, security agents, or an individual. Zambia belongs to its people. Political power is entrusted by the people through the ballot. It cannot legitimately be acquired or retained through fear, intimidation, manipulation, or interference with electoral records. Power belongs to the people. Let us not subvert it. You cannot have a genuinely free and fair election in an atmosphere of terror, intimidation, and manipulation. We urge every Zambian to remain peaceful but vigilant. Protect evidence, preserve copies of Gen 20 forms, document irregularities, report intimidation, reject violence and provocation, use every lawful and constitutional mechanism available. Protecting the vote does not mean taking the law into our own hands. It means documenting irregularities, preserving evidence, insisting upon transparency, and pursuing lawful constitutional remedies. We therefore ask ECZ to demonstrate its independence through its actions. Open the records, account for every Gen 20 form, explain every material discrepancy, protect returning officers and electoral officers, allow accredited agents to do their work without threats, investigate every credible allegation of interference, guarantee due process and access to lawyers and families for those detained, allow independent scrutiny of every genuinely disputed result. No institution should manufacture victory for any candidate, and no candidate should be denied victory where that candidate has genuinely been chosen by the people. The solution remains clear. Preserve the original Gen 20 forms, disclose their chain of custody, reconcile every disputed figure, and allow the votes actually cast by Zambians to determine the President of the Republic. We ask for no manufactured advantage. We demand only that the true vote of the Zambian people be respected. The Commission must protect the process, not the incumbent. It must protect the ballot, not political power. It must protect the voter, not the government of the day. Power belongs to the people. The vote belongs to the people. Zambia belongs to the people. The will of the people must prevail. We are one Zambia and one nation, and so we must continue. And to all our members and every citizen out there, I wish to assure you that the President is okay, he's in high spirits, he's determined to ensure that this process is legitimately concluded. And it is the call of I and the President that all of us should rally around this process. We should be vigilant and ensure that the right thing is done. The leadership of Tonse Pamosi Woza Alliance is determined that what truly belongs to the people is the final determination of this election. Please stay safe and be assured that your leadership is on top of things and looking forward to preserve your interests. I thank you.